10 days before Thanksgiving, I accidentally discovered my daughter Sarah's plan to humiliate me at our family dinner. I'd gone to her house to drop off the antique turkey platter she'd asked to borrow when I overheard her on the phone through the kitchen window. "Dad's getting too old to manage his money," she laughed. "After Thanksgiving dinner, we'll have him declared incompetent. The house alone is worth $2 million. My heart stopped. After 40 years of providing everything for her, this was my thanks. My name is Milton Hayes, and at 70 years old, I thought I'd seen enough of life to avoid any major surprises. I'd built Hayes Construction from nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox into a company worth $8 million before I sold it, 5 years ago. My hands still bore the calluses from those early days when I'd worked 16-hour shifts, laying foundations and framing houses determined to give my family everything I'd never had growing up. I live alone now in our suburban Denver home, the same 4,000-square-foot colonial where my wife Martha and I raised our daughter Sarah. Martha passed 3 years ago after a brutal fight with pancreatic cancer. Those final months watching the woman I'd loved for 45 years fade away had been the hardest thing I'd ever endured. The house feels too big without her laughter filling it, but I can't bring myself to leave the place where we shared so many memories. Sarah is 38, now married to Thomas Brennan, an investment banker who always seemed more interested in my portfolio than my stories. They have 2 wonderful children, Emma, who just turned 12, and has Martha's green eyes and gentle spirit, and Jack, 10 years old, with an infectious grin and a talent for baseball that reminds me of my younger self. I'd given Sarah everything a father could provide. When she decided on Stanford for her undergraduate degree, I wrote the checks without blinking. Law school at Columbia followed another $300,000 that I gladly paid because education was the gift that kept giving. Her wedding at the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs cost more than my first house, but seeing her walk down that aisle in Martha's vintage dress, altered to fit perfectly, made every penny worthwhile. When Sarah and Thomas bought their house in Cherry Creek, Denver's most exclusive neighborhood, I handed them a check for $300,000 for the down payment. "Every young family needs a good start," I'd told them, remembering my own early struggles to make rent while building my business. Since Martha's death, though, something had shifted in Sarah's behavior. It started subtly with suggestions that I might be lonely in such a big house. She'd leave brochures for upscale senior living communities on my kitchen counter during her visits, always with sticky notes marking the best options. "They have activities, Dad," she'd say, patting my hand as if I were a child who needed entertainment. "Wouldn't it be nice to have people your own age around?" Then came the conversations about powers of attorney. Sarah, using her law degree like a weapon of persuasion, insisted I needed to designate someone to handle my affairs, just in case something happens. She'd presented it as routine legal housekeeping, the responsible thing to do. Against my better judgment, I'd signed the documents she'd prepared, making her my financial power of attorney in case of incapacitation. At the time, it seemed like a reasonable precaution. The call that started everything came on a Tuesday morning. Sarah's voice bubbled with unusual warmth through the phone. "Dad, I'm hosting Thanksgiving this year, and I want to use Grandma's turkey platter. You know, the blue willow one she brought from England. It would mean so much to have that family tradition on the table." My heart had swelled with pride. Sarah rarely showed interest in family heirlooms anymore, too busy with her modern life to care about antique china. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll bring it over later this week." "Oh, there's no rush," she'd said quickly. "Just whenever you have time. Maybe Thursday afternoon Thomas and I will both be working from home." I'd decided to surprise her by bringing it early on Wednesday, along with a box of Martha's handwritten recipe cards I'd found while organizing the pantry. Sarah had loved helping her mother cook during the holidays, and I thought she might want to recreate some of those dishes for her own children. That Wednesday afternoon, I'd loaded the platter and recipes into my Buick, handling them as carefully as newborns. The November air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from fireplaces coming alive for the season. I'd even stopped at the grocery store to pick up ingredients for Martha's famous cranberry sauce, planning to leave them as an extra surprise. Pulling into Sarah's circular driveway at 2 in the afternoon, I'd noticed both cars present Sarah's white Mercedes SUV and Thomas's black BMW 7 Series. It struck me as odd, since Thomas typically worked late at the investment firm downtown, but I figured maybe he'd taken time off for the holiday preparations. I'd gathered my packages and walked toward the front door, breathing in the familiar scent of the pine trees we'd planted together when they first moved in 5 years ago. As I approached the entrance, I heard Sarah's voice carrying through the partially open kitchen window. The unseasonable warmth had probably prompted them to air out the house. I was about to call out a greeting when I heard my name. "Dad's getting too old to manage his money." Sarah said, her tone light and amused, so different from the concerned daughter act she'd been playing for months. "Trust me, Gerald, this is foolproof. After Thanksgiving dinner, when everyone's full of turkey and wine, we'll have him sign the papers. By the time he realizes what's happened, if he ever does, we'll have full control. The house alone is worth $2 million, and that's before we even touch his investment accounts." My legs turned to water. I stood frozen on the brick walkway, packages trembling in my arms as my daughter continued outlining her betrayal. Through the window, I could see her pacing the kitchen phone, pressed to her ear, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. "Thomas already has Dr. Kumar on board," she continued. "He'll provide the medical evaluation stating Dad's showing signs of dementia. We've been documenting everything for months now. Every time he forgets where he put his reading glasses, every time he tells the same story twice, it's all been recorded. Mother's death really did a number on him, you know. He's vulnerable." A male voice I recognized as Thomas's added from somewhere deeper in the kitchen. "Tell Gerald about the nurse visit next week. That's going to seal the deal." Sarah laughed, the sound like breaking glass in my ears. "Oh yes, my friend Nancy, she's a registered nurse, is going to do a wellness check on Dad next Monday. She knows exactly what to write in her report. Confusion, memory lapses, inability to manage complex tasks. Between her evaluation and Dr. Kumar's diagnosis, no court will question our petition for conservatorship. And the best part," Thomas's voice grew louder as he apparently moved closer to Sarah, "is that Milton trusts us completely. He'll show up for Thanksgiving dinner thinking he's surrounded by loving family. Instead, he'll be walking into an intervention. We'll have Jessica there to notarize everything on the spot." My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the platter that had survived a century only to witness this moment of treachery. 40 years of love, sacrifice, and provision reduced to a scheme discussed as casually as planning a grocery list. "The old fool actually believes I care about that stupid turkey platter," Sarah said, and I heard the cruelty in her voice that must have always been there, hidden beneath dutiful daughter smiles. "As if I'd want to serve food on some musty antique. The minute we get power of attorney, I'm selling everything in that house and putting him in the cheapest facility Medicare will cover. Sunny Acres has an opening in their memory care unit. He'll be drooling into his pudding while we renovate this place with his money." I don't remember walking back to my car. Somehow I found myself sitting behind the wheel packages, still clutched against my chest, trembling from shock rather than cold. My daughter, my only child, the little girl who used to fall asleep in my arms while I read her bedtime stories, was planning to steal everything I'd worked for and lock me away like an unwanted pet. But as I sat there in my car watching the house where my daughter plotted my destruction, something else began to replace the shock and hurt. It wasn't anger exactly. It was colder than that, more calculated. If Sarah wanted to play games with the law, she'd forgotten who taught her to be strategic in the first place. You don't build a construction empire in Denver without learning how to outmaneuver those who try to tear you down. I carefully placed Martha's platter and recipes on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove away from my daughter's house. She wanted to document evidence of my decline. I'd give her evidence, all right. Just not the kind she was expecting. As I pulled out of her neighborhood, I found myself thinking of something Martha used to say. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. I'd just been shown the truth about Sarah, and I believed it. Now it was time to show her who Milton Hayes really was when someone tried to destroy him. The game was on, and my daughter had no idea she'd already lost. I drove for 20 minutes before pulling into a shopping center parking lot, my hands finally steady enough to reach for my phone. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold clarity I hadn't felt since my combat days in Vietnam. Back then, survival meant thinking 3 steps ahead of the enemy. This wasn't so different, except the enemy was my own flesh and blood. My first call was to Robert Sullivan, my closest friend, since we'd served together in the 75th Rangers. Robert had traded his military uniform for a 3-piece suit and built one of Denver's most prestigious law firms. More importantly, he was one of the few people I trusted completely. "Milton?" He answered on the second ring, his voice warm with genuine pleasure. "Tell me you're calling to accept my invitation for Thanksgiving. Helen's making enough food to feed a battalion." "Robert, I need to see you. Today. It's urgent." The warmth vanished, replaced by the sharp attention that had kept us both alive in hostile territory. "How urgent are we talking?" "My daughter's trying to have me declared incompetent and steal my assets." Silence stretched between us before he spoke again. "I'll clear my afternoon. Can you be here in 30 minutes? "So 20, I said, already pulling out of the parking lot. Robert's office occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel, reaching toward the Colorado sky. His assistant, recognizing me from years of friendship, waved me straight through to his private office. Robert stood as I entered, his silver hair and lined face showing our shared 70 years, but his eyes as sharp as ever. "Tell me everything," he said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey from the bottle he kept for special occasions and emergencies. This qualified as both. I laid out every detail from Sarah's recent behavior to the conversation I'd overheard. Robert listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled under his chin. "Elder financial abuse," he said quietly. "It's more common than you'd think, and family members are the most frequent perpetrators. The fact that she's pre-planning false medical evaluations makes this conspiracy to commit fraud. That's federal territory if she's using mail or wire communications." "What do I do?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "First, we protect your assets immediately. Second, we document everything. Third, we let them hang themselves with their own rope." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Jennifer Walsh, best private investigator in the state, former FBI Financial Crimes Division. If your daughter's been planning this for months, there's a trail." Within 2 hours, I was sitting in a conference room with Robert and Jennifer, a composed woman in her 50s, who took notes in shorthand while I repeated my story. Her questions were precise, probing for details I hadn't even considered relevant. "This nurse visit next Monday," she said, tapping her pen against her notepad. "That's medical fraud if she's being paid to falsify records. The doctor, too. These licenses are federal. They're risking everything for what a few $1,000s. "Sarah can be very persuasive," I said bitterly. "She convinced me to sign power of attorney documents after all." "About that," Robert interjected, "we need to revoke those immediately. I'll prepare new documents naming David as your alternate, your nephew the judge." I nodded. David was Frank's son, a respected district court judge, known for his integrity. Sarah had always resented him for following in her footsteps to law school and surpassing her career achievements. Jennifer stood gathering her materials. "I'll start surveillance immediately. Financial records, phone records, any communication between your daughter and these medical professionals. Give me 48 hours for a preliminary report." "What about protecting my assets in the meantime?" I asked. Robert smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Leave that to me. By tomorrow morning, your liquid assets will be in an irrevocable trust that would take an act of God to crack. Your real estate will follow by end of week. She can't steal what she can't touch." That evening, I sat in my home office surrounded by financial statements and legal documents. $8 million in assets accumulated over a lifetime of 18-hour days, careful investments, and delayed gratification. I'd always planned to leave most of it to Sarah and the grandchildren with generous donations to the veterans organizations Martha had supported. Now I was restructuring everything to protect it from my own daughter. I worked with my financial advisor through the night, liquidating some positions, transferring others. By dawn, $6 million resided in a trust structure that Robert had designed with David named as successor trustee. The house would take longer due to real estate transfer requirements, but Robert had strategies for that too. Thursday brought Jennifer's first report delivered in person to maintain confidentiality. What she'd uncovered made my stomach turn. "Your daughter and son-in-law are in serious financial trouble," she said, spreading bank records across my dining room table. "They're carrying $400,000 in debt, not counting the mortgage. Thomas has been making increasingly risky investments trying to maintain their lifestyle. 3 months ago, he borrowed heavily to invest in a cryptocurrency scheme that collapsed. Their house alone is worth $1.8 million, I said. Why not sell and downsize?" Jennifer pulled out another document. "Because they're underwater on the mortgage. They did a cash-out refinance last year and spent the money on renovations and a vacation home in Vail they've already lost to foreclosure. Their credit is destroyed. Your money is their only way out." "What about Thomas's job at the investment firm?" "That's where it gets interesting." She showed me a printed email exchange. "My contacts in the financial sector tell me he's under internal investigation for misappropriating client funds. Nothing proven yet, but he's been moving money between accounts in ways that suggest he's been borrowing from clients to cover personal debts. If that's true, he's looking at federal charges." The scope of their desperation was becoming clear. This wasn't just greed. It was survival. They needed my money to avoid bankruptcy, disgrace, and possibly prison. That made them dangerous. "There's more," Jennifer continued. "The nurse Sarah mentioned Nancy Garrett lost her hospital job 6 months ago for falsifying patient records. She's working private home health now, probably because no institution will hire her. Dr. Kumar is also in financial trouble, going through an expensive divorce. Your daughter found perfect accomplices, people desperate enough to risk their professional licenses for money." I spent Friday implementing the next phase of protection. Every valuable in the house was documented, photographed, and cataloged. Martha's jewelry went into a safety deposit box at a different bank. Important documents were copied and stored in multiple locations. I even installed a hidden security system, tiny cameras, that would record any activity in key areas of the house. But the most important preparation was mental. I had to become someone else, play a role that would convince Sarah her plan was working. So I practiced in front of the mirror, letting my shoulders slump, adding a slight hesitation to my speech. I scattered reading glasses around the house and pretended to look for them when Sarah called. I repeated stories I'd already told, then acted embarrassed when she pointed it out. "Dad, you just told me about the new neighbors yesterday," she'd say with false concern. "Did I? Oh, well, they seem nice anyway." I'd let worry creep into my voice. "I've been feeling a bit foggy lately. Maybe it's just the weather." "Maybe you should see a doctor," she'd suggest, and I could hear the satisfaction underneath her worry. "You might be right, sweetheart. Say, didn't you mention something about a nurse who could check on me?" The eagerness in her voice was sickening. "Yes, Nancy's wonderful, very thorough. I could arrange for her to stop by next week if you'd like." "That would be nice. It's good to have a daughter who cares." If she caught the irony, she didn't show it. We set the appointment for Monday afternoon, giving me the weekend to prepare my counter-move. Saturday morning, I met with Robert and Jennifer at Robert's home, away from any possible surveillance. We sat in his study, planning like generals before a battle. "The nurse visit is key," Robert said. "If we can document her attempting to falsify medical records, that's conspiracy to commit fraud. Federal crime, 5 to 10 years. I've arranged for Dr. Marcus Harrison to be there," Jennifer added. He's the leading geriatric psychiatrist in the state, expert witness in dozens of competency cases. He'll conduct a real evaluation before the nurse arrives, then observe her visit from another room. "Won't Sarah be suspicious if another doctor is there?" I asked. Robert smiled. "Dr. Harrison will be there as your neighbor, stopping by to borrow a cup of sugar. Sarah doesn't know your neighbors. He'll slip out to observe from the study while maintaining video contact to monitor the situation." "What about recording the conversation?" "Colorado is a one-party consent state," Robert confirmed. "You can record anything you're part of. We'll have multiple devices running, plus Dr. Harrison as a witness. When she tries to document symptoms that don't exist, we'll have her dead to rights." I spent Sunday visiting Frank and Dorothy, my younger siblings, who'd stood by me through every crisis life had thrown our way. We sat in Frank's kitchen, coffee growing cold, as I explained what Sarah was planning. Dorothy, normally the sweetest person alive, had tears of rage in her eyes. "That ungrateful little witch," she hissed, using the strongest language I'd ever heard from her. "After everything you've done, everything you've given her, Martha would be heartbroken." Frank, ever practical, was already thinking ahead. "What do you need from us?" "Come to Thanksgiving dinner at Sarah's. Act normal, but watch for anything suspicious. She mentioned having other people there as witnesses to my supposed incompetence. I need you to be my witnesses to what really happens." "We'll be there," Dorothy said firmly. "And Milton, we're bringing Michael." Michael was Dorothy's son, a detective with the Denver Police Department specializing in financial crimes. Having law enforcement in the family might make Sarah think twice about her plans, or it might make her more desperate. Either way, I wanted him there. "There's something else," I said, pulling out 2 envelopes. "I'm setting up education trusts for Emma and Jack, $50,000 each for now, more to be added later. I want you to be the trustees, Dorothy. Whatever happens with Sarah, those children shouldn't suffer for their parents' crimes." Dorothy took the envelopes with tears in her eyes. "You're a good man, Milton Hayes. Better than she deserves." As I drove home that evening, I thought about the week ahead. Monday would bring the nurse's visit and the first real test of my acting abilities. Then Thanksgiving, where Sarah planned to spring her trap, not knowing I'd already escaped it and built one of my own. I pulled into my garage and sat for a moment in the darkness. Somewhere in this house were photos of Sarah as a baby, her first finger paintings, report cards I'd saved, father-daughter dance photos from high school. That girl was gone if she'd ever really existed. The woman plotting to destroy me was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. But I was Milton Hayes. I'd built a company from nothing. I'd survived a war. I'd held my wife's hand as she took her last breath and found the strength to go on. I'd survive this too, and maybe save my grandchildren from growing up thinking their parents' greed was normal. The battle lines were drawn. Now all that remained was to wait for Monday and let Sarah think she was winning right up until the moment she realized she'd lost everything that actually mattered. Monday arrived with the kind of crystalline Colorado morning that made the mountains look close enough to touch. I woke at 5, my military habits intact even after all these years, and went through my normal routine with special attention to detail. Every action needed to appear ordinary while being anything but. Dr. Marcus Harrison arrived at 9 for the legitimate cognitive evaluation. A distinguished man in his 60s with silver temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades being the smartest person in most rooms. "Mr. Hayes," he said, shaking my hand firmly in my living room, "Robert Sullivan speaks very highly of you. I understand we have an interesting situation today." "That's one way to put it," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. "My daughter's trying to have me declared incompetent using a nurse who's apparently willing to lie for money. Unfortunately, I see this more often than you'd think." He pulled out a leather portfolio and pen. "Before we deal with that, I need to conduct a thorough evaluation. This will serve 2 purposes: documenting your actual cognitive state and preparing you for the tricks this nurse might try to use." For the next 2 hours, Dr. Harrison put me through a comprehensive battery of tests. We started with basic orientation questions, moved through memory exercises, mathematical calculations, and complex problem-solving scenarios. He showed me patterns to remember, told me stories, and asked me to recall details, had me draw clock faces and geometric shapes. "Now," he said, leaning forward with a conspiratorial air, "let me show you what someone trying to fake results might do. There's a common test where I tell you 3 words to remember, then distract you with other tasks before asking you to recall them. A dishonest evaluator might give you unusually complex words or create excessive distractions to induce failure." We practiced several scenarios where standard tests could be manipulated. He showed me how leading questions could be phrased to elicit confused responses, how physical positioning could be used to increase anxiety, even how lighting and room temperature might be adjusted to create discomfort that mimicked cognitive symptoms. "Your results, by the way, are exceptional," he said, closing his portfolio. "Not just for a 70-year-old, but for anyone. Your cognitive function tests in the 98th percentile. Whatever your daughter's planning, it has no basis in medical reality." At noon, we prepared for Nancy's arrival. The hidden cameras were activated recording devices strategically placed. Dr. Harrison would be in my study watching through a concealed camera while maintaining audio contact through a nearly invisible earpiece I wore. Remember, he coached initially present as slightly tired or distracted, but nothing extreme. Let her guide the conversation. If she starts falsifying symptoms, gradually reveal your actual capacity. We want to document her intent to deceive. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. I took a deep breath, slumped my shoulders slightly, and shuffled to the door, adding 10 years to my gait. Nancy Garrett stood on my porch, a woman in her 40s with bottle blonde hair and a practiced smile that didn't reach her calculating eyes. She wore scrubs designed to look medical, but casual, carrying a leather bag that presumably held her tools of deception. "Mr. Hayes, I'm Nancy Sarah's friend. She asked me to stop by and check on you." "Oh, yes, yes," I said, letting my voice waver slightly. "Sarah mentioned, or was that yesterday? Come in, please. Would you like some tea?" I led her to the living room, noticing how her eyes swept the space cataloging valuables like a burglar casing a job. She settled onto my couch with false warmth, pulling out what appeared to be standard medical equipment, but also a notepad already filled with writing. Pre-documented symptoms, I realized. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Hayes?" she asked, her voice syrupy sweet. "Oh, fair to middling," I said, sitting heavily in my armchair. "Some days are better than others since Martha, that was my wife, she passed." "I'm so sorry for your loss. How long ago was that?" Here was the first test. Sarah knew exactly when her mother had died. If Nancy was honest, she wouldn't try to trip me up on this. 3 years, I said clearly. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. Nancy's pen moved across her notepad. "That's very specific. Do you find yourself dwelling on exact dates and times? Wouldn't you remember the day your world ended?" I let genuine emotion creep into my voice. She shifted tactics. "Sarah tells me you've been having some confusion lately, forgetting where you put things." "Everyone misplaces things," I said mildly. "Of course, but she mentioned you couldn't find your reading glasses 5 times last week." "Interesting. I'd only talked to Sarah 3 times last week and I'd mentioned glasses once." The inflation of incidents was beginning. "I have several pairs," I explained. "I leave them in different rooms. It's not forgetting where one pair is if I simply grab another." Nancy's smile tightened. She pulled out a blood pressure cuff. "Let me just check your vitals." As she wrapped the cuff around my arm, she kept talking. "Sarah's worried you might be making some risky financial decisions. She mentioned you talking about giving money to strangers. This was new. I'd never discussed anything like that with Sarah. I donate to veterans' charities, if that's what you mean. Have for decades." "No. She specifically mentioned you talking about giving large sums to people you'd just met. A taxi driver." a waitress. I heard Dr. Harrison's voice in my earpiece. She's planting false symptoms. This is exactly what we need. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said carefully. I tip generously, always have. 20% minimum, often more for good service. That's not the same as giving away large sums. Nancy scribbled furiously. Sometimes we think we're being normal when our behavior has actually changed. Have you noticed any difficulty with numbers, calculating tips, for instance? Time to spring the trap. Actually, I've always been quite good with numbers. Built a construction company from the ground up, you know. Would you like to test me? Oh, I'm sure that's not necessary. No, please. I leaned forward, letting my confusion act drop away. If Sarah's concerned about my mathematical abilities, let's check them properly. Give me any calculation you'd like. Nancy looked uncomfortable. Well, perhaps. What's 17% of 243? I didn't even pause. $41.31. Though for a restaurant bill that size, I'd probably leave 50. The service would have to be terrible to stick to exactly 17%. Her pen stopped moving. That's very precise. Construction contracts require precision. Now, what else would you like to test? My memory? Perhaps I noticed you already had notes on your pad before we started talking. Funny thing for a preliminary assessment, don't you think? Nancy's face flushed. These are just standard questions I prepare. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you came here with a diagnosis already written. Tell me, what exactly did Sarah promise to pay you for this evaluation? The mask slipped completely. Nancy's expression hardened, but before she could respond, I continued. See, the interesting thing about having a construction company is you learn to spot when someone's trying to sell you inferior materials at premium prices. You develop an instinct for dishonesty. And right now, my instinct is screaming that you're not here to evaluate my health at all. Nancy started shoving equipment back into her bag. I don't have to listen to these accusations. No, you don't, I agreed pleasantly. But you might want to know that I had a complete cognitive evaluation this morning by Dr. Marcus Harrison. Do you know who he is? Her face went pale. Everyone in Colorado medical circles knew Dr. Harrison's reputation. He tested everything: memory, reasoning, mathematical ability, executive function. Would you like to know my results? Nancy stood abruptly. I have to go. 98th percentile. I continued calmly. I also had my lawyer present during the evaluation. We recorded everything just as we're recording this conversation. So when you write your report claiming I show signs of dementia, we'll have interesting evidence to present to the medical board. She practically ran for the door, but I followed at a measured pace. One more thing, Nancy. I know about your termination from Denver General for falsifying patient records. Did Sarah know that when she hired you? Or did she specifically seek out someone with flexible ethics? At the door, Nancy turned back, her face a mixture of anger and fear. You can't prove anything. I don't have to prove you falsified records today, I said quietly. You never got that far. But conspiracy to commit fraud, planning to create false medical documents, that's different. My lawyer tells me the federal authorities take a dim view of medical professionals who sell their credentials to the highest bidder. After she left tires squealing as she pulled away, Dr. Harrison emerged from the study. That was masterfully handled, he said. We have everything we need. She'll either refuse to write a report or create something so obviously false that no court would accept it. What's your professional opinion of her? I asked. Desperate, unethical, and probably racing to call your daughter right now to report failure. He pulled out his phone. I'll have my evaluation notarized and filed with the court today. Any competency challenge will have to overcome my findings, which won't be easy. An hour after Dr. Harrison left, my phone rang. Sarah's name on the screen made my stomach tighten, but I answered with practiced weariness. Hi, sweetheart. Dad, I just heard from Nancy. She said you were hostile and paranoid. She's very concerned about your mental state. Was I? How strange. I thought we had a nice chat. She seemed nervous, though, kept writing things before asking questions. Do you know her well? She's a professional dad. Maybe you misunderstood what was happening. Maybe, I agreed readily. I've been feeling sharper lately, actually. Must be the vitamins Frank recommended. Say, are we still on for Thanksgiving? Of course. The relief in her voice was palpable. She thought I was backing down, becoming compliant again. 2 o'clock sharp, don't be late. Wouldn't miss it. Oh, Dorothy and Frank are coming too. And Michael might stop by if he's not working. You remember my nephew, the detective? A pause. I thought it was just going to be family. They are family, Sarah. The only family I have left besides you. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. One battle won, but the war was far from over. Nancy's failure would make Sarah desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. I opened a drawer and pulled out a photo from Sarah's college graduation. She stood between Martha and me, radiant with accomplishment, our arms around her. We'd been so proud that day. Somewhere between then and now, that bright young woman had transformed into someone willing to destroy her father for money. But Thursday would bring the final reckoning. Sarah thought she was arranging my humiliation and downfall. Instead, she'd orchestrated her own. The irony wasn't lost on me, though it brought no pleasure. Victory would taste like ashes, but sometimes ashes were all that remained when trust burned away. I put the photo back and began preparing for the final act. Tuesday morning dawned gray and cold, matching my mood as I sat at my dining room table surrounded by legal documents, bank statements, and a life's worth of memories reduced to paper. Robert had sent over the final trust documents, and I signed each one with a steady hand, officially moving the bulk of my assets beyond Sarah's reach. But legal protection was only part of what I needed to accomplish. The rest required more delicate preparation, starting with the drawer in Sarah's guest room, where I would leave my final message. I spent hours crafting the letter to Sarah, writing and rewriting until every word carried the weight I intended. My dearest Sarah, by the time you read this, you will have discovered that your plans for my future have failed. I know about everything: the calls to Gerald, the conspiracy with Nancy and Dr. Kumar, the documents you planned to have me sign at Thanksgiving dinner. I want you to know that despite your betrayal, I love you. I have always loved you from the moment the nurse placed you in my arms 40 years ago. That love is why this hurts so deeply. You weren't stealing from a stranger or a business rival. You were planning to destroy your father, the man who held your hand on your first day of school, who taught you to ride a bicycle, who walked you down the aisle at your wedding. Your mother would be heartbroken, not just by your actions, but by what you've become. Where did we fail you, Sarah? When did money become more important than family? When did your father become nothing more than a bank account to plunder? I've protected your children's futures, though not yours. Emma and Jack will have their education funded through trusts managed by Dorothy. They are innocent in this, and I won't let your greed destroy their chances. As for you and Thomas, you'll have to face the consequences of your choices without my resources to cushion the fall. I hope someday you'll understand what you've lost. Not money or houses or things, but the love and trust of a father who would have given you everything if you'd simply honored the relationship we once had. Despite everything, I remain your father. Alongside the letter, I prepared the other contents for the drawer copies of my new will, leaving the house to the Colorado Veterans Foundation, the complete cognitive evaluation from Dr. Harrison, with his notarized statement, printed transcripts of Sarah's recorded conversations about her plans, Jennifer's private investigation report documenting their debts, and Thomas's likely embezzlement, and a USB drive containing audio recordings of every conversation where Sarah had tried to manipulate me into appearing confused. On a separate paper, I listed the FBI agent's name and direct number, with a note that Thomas's signature forgery on loan documents had been reported and was under investigation. The technical preparations were straightforward, but the emotional ones were harder. I drove to the cemetery where Martha lay buried and sat beside her headstone as a light snow began to fall. "I don't know if you can hear me, love," I said quietly, "but I need to tell you what's happening. Our daughter, our Sarah, she's not who we thought she was. Maybe she never was. I'm about to do something that will change everything, and I need you to understand why." I told Martha's grave the whole story, finding comfort in speaking to her, even if she couldn't answer. By the time I finished, the snow had dusted her headstone white. "I'm protecting the grandchildren," I concluded. "That's what you'd want me to do. Save what can be saved. Let the rest face justice." Wednesday brought a flurry of activity. Jennifer called with updates on her investigation, each revelation worse than the last. "Thomas was definitely fired," she confirmed. "Not laid off or downsized, but terminated for cause. He's been using his old business cards and letterhead to maintain the illusion he's still employed. The FBI investigation is real and moving forward. They found evidence he moved client funds to cover personal trading losses." "How long before he's arrested?" "My contact says within 2 weeks. They're building an airtight case." "And Sarah, is she implicated?" "Not in the embezzlement directly, but she's been cashing checks from accounts that don't belong to Thomas. If she knew the source of the funds that's receiving stolen property." I felt sick. My daughter wasn't just greedy, she was potentially a criminal. "Is there any way to protect her from prosecution?" Jennifer's silence stretched before she answered carefully. "Milton, I understand she's your daughter, but she was planning to have you declared incompetent and steal your life's work. Maybe facing consequences is what she needs." After Jennifer left, I made arrangements for Thursday's alternative Thanksgiving celebration. The private dining room at the Brown Palace Hotel could accommodate 20 guests, and I called each person individually to invite them. Frank and Dorothy, of course, along with their families. Robert and his wife, Helen. Several old friends from my construction days. Even Mrs. Chen from next door, who'd been bringing me soup and checking on me since Martha passed. "But won't you be at your daughter's?" Mrs. Chen asked, confused. "I'll make an appearance," I said carefully. "But my real family, the people who actually care about me rather than my bank account, will be dining at the Brown Palace at 4 o'clock. I hope you'll join us." The hardest call was to David, my nephew, the judge. I needed him to understand the situation fully, as he would be managing the trust if something happened to me. "Uncle Milton," he said after I'd explained everything, "I'm honored by your trust, but I'm also furious. How dare Sarah do this to you after everything you've done for her?" "People change, David. Or maybe they just reveal who they always were. Either way, I need to know the grandchildren will be protected if Thomas and Sarah end up in legal trouble." "You have my word. But Uncle Milton, don't let her manipulation make you doubt yourself. What you're doing is justice, not cruelty." Thursday morning, Thanksgiving Day. I woke before dawn and prepared carefully. I dressed in my best suit, the charcoal gray one Martha had picked out for our 40th anniversary. I wanted to look sharp, competent, in control, everything Sarah was betting I wouldn't be. I packed the materials for Sarah's drawer in a small leather portfolio, then called for a car. Not driving myself would feed into her narrative of my declining abilities, while actually demonstrating prudent judgment. At 10 o'clock, I received a text from Sarah. "Can't wait to see you, Dad, 2 p.m., don't forget me." The patronizing tone, as if I were a child who might forget a major holiday, strengthened my resolve. I responded simply, "Looking forward to it." I spent the late morning at the Brown Palace checking on arrangements for our real celebration. The dining room was elegant, with views of the mountains and space for everyone to feel comfortable. I'd ordered traditional Thanksgiving fare, but also some of Martha's favorite dishes, wanting to honor her memory with people who'd actually loved her. The hotel manager, whom I'd known for years through various construction projects, pulled me aside. "Mr. Hayes, I heard about your wife. I'm so sorry. She was a lovely woman." "Thank you, Charles. She would have loved this gathering." Speaking of which, I have an unusual request. If anyone calls looking for me between 2 and 4 this afternoon, could you tell them I'm in a private event and can't be disturbed?" He nodded without questioning the discretion of a fine hotel professional. At 1:30, I had the driver take me to Sarah's house. We drove through her neighborhood, where other families would be gathering in warmth and genuine love. How many of them, I wondered, had children plotting against parents? How many fake smiles would be exchanged over turkey and stuffing? "Sir," the driver asked, as we approached Sarah's house, "would you like me to wait?" I looked at the circular driveway already filling with cars. Dr. Kumar's Lexus, a Honda that probably belonged to Jessica the notary. Other vehicles I didn't recognize, all part of Sarah's carefully orchestrated ambush. "Yes," I decided. "Park where you can see the front door. I may need to leave quickly." The driver, a young veteran named Marcus, who'd mentioned serving in Afghanistan during our earlier conversation, gave me a sharp look. "Sir, is everything all right? Do you need backup?" His military instincts had detected the mission parameters. I smiled. "Just a family situation that might require tactical withdrawal. If I text you the word extract, pull up to the door immediately." "Roger that, sir." He parked strategically, engine running. I stood at Sarah's front door for a moment, portfolio in hand, snow beginning to fall again. Behind this door waited my daughter, her co-conspirators, and the final act of our family tragedy. But I was ready. The evidence was prepared, the assets protected, the real family celebration arranged. All that remained was to play my part, one last time, to let Sarah believe she was winning right up until the moment she opened that drawer and realized she'd lost everything. I rang the doorbell, hearing the chimes echo through the house where my daughter had plotted my destruction. When the door opened, I would step into the arena one final time. But this time I knew exactly who my enemies were and what weapons they'd chosen. The gladiator was ready for the Colosseum. I woke in my hotel suite at the Brown Palace at 5 in the morning, the Denver skyline still glittering with nighttime lights. Steam rose from my coffee cup as I stood at the window watching the city wake up on Thanksgiving Day. Somewhere across town, my daughter was probably already awake too, finalizing her plans to destroy me over dinner. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent the night in a hotel to avoid any last-minute attempts by Sarah to create evidence of confusion or incompetence. If she'd sent someone to my house and found me gone, it would only feed her narrative that I was becoming unpredictable. Let her think that. Every assumption she made was another bar in the cage she was building for herself. My phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Dorothy's making her cornbread stuffing. Says she's bringing enough for an army. You sure you want to go to Sarah's first?" "Strategic necessity," I typed back. "See you at the hotel at 4. As morning light painted the mountains gold, I ordered room service and reviewed my plan one final time. The portfolio with evidence for Sarah's drawer sat on the desk, each document a testament to betrayal and its consequences. I'd added one final item during the night, a photograph of Sarah at age 5, sitting on my shoulders at a construction site, wearing a tiny hard hat and grinning at the camera. On the back, I'd written, "This is the daughter I'll always love. I hope someday she finds her way back." At 9 o'clock, Robert called. "Everything's filed with the court," he reported. "The trust documents are ironclad, and I've notified the major banks about potential fraudulent attempts to access your accounts. Also, Jennifer heard from her FBI contact. Thomas is going to be arrested Monday morning." 3 days after Thanksgiving, I mused. At least the grandchildren will have one last normal holiday memory. Normal might be stretching it given what's planned for today. You sure you don't want me there? "This is something I need to do alone, Robert. But thank you for everything." After we hung up, I dressed carefully in my charcoal suit, added the tie clip Martha had given me for our 25th anniversary, and looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a 70-year-old man who'd built something from nothing, survived a war, lost the love of his life, and discovered his only child was a viper. But I also saw strength, clarity, purpose. The phone rang. Sarah. Happy Thanksgiving, Dad. Her voice bubbled with false cheer. Just wanted to make sure you're coming. 2:00. Sharp. Remember. How could I forget my daughter's Thanksgiving dinner? Well, you have been a bit forgetful lately, she said with practiced concern. Did you arrange transportation I could send Thomas to pick you up? The thought of being trapped in a car with my soon-to-be-arrested son-in-law held no appeal. Already arranged, sweetheart. I'll see you at 2. Perfect, and Dad. I have some papers for you to look at. Just some financial planning stuff to protect your assets. Thomas found a great advisor who specializes in senior portfolios. The audacity was breathtaking. Whatever you think is best, Sarah. I could practically hear her smile through the phone. That's the spirit. See you soon. I spent the late morning walking through downtown Denver, despite the cold. The streets were quiet, most businesses closed for the holiday. I found myself at the site where I'd built my first major project, a medical building that still stood 45 years later. Good-boned, solid construction built to last. Unlike my family, apparently. Marcus, the driver from yesterday, was waiting when I called at 1:00. Same destination, sir. Same destination, same extraction protocol. Copy that, I'll be ready. During the drive to Sarah's house, I thought about military operations I'd been part of 50 years ago. The key to success was often letting the enemy think they were winning until the moment of reversal. Sarah had studied law, but she'd never studied war. That would be her downfall. Her street was packed with cars when we arrived. I counted at least 12 vehicles, far more than necessary for a family dinner. Sarah had assembled quite an audience for my supposed humiliation. A lot of backup for a family meal, Marcus observed. They think it's an ambush, I said, checking my tie in the mirror. They're right. They just don't know who's ambushing whom. Sir, I know it's not my place, but family stuff can go sideways fast. You need me to do more than just drive. I appreciated his concern. Just keep that engine running, son. And here. I handed him a $100 bill. Happy Thanksgiving. You remind me of myself at your age. Thank you, sir. I'll be right here. The walk to Sarah's door felt both endless and too short. Inside that house waited my daughter, her desperate husband, and a collection of people prepared to help steal my freedom and fortune. The portfolio under my arm contained their downfall, but delivering it meant accepting that my relationship with Sarah was truly dead. I rang the doorbell at exactly 2:00. Sarah opened the door herself, dressed in an elegant burgundy dress that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Her smile was perfect, practiced predatory. Dad, right on time. Come in, come in. Everyone's dying to see you. She took my arm ostensibly to help, but actually to guide me to control my movement. I let her, noting how she made sure to walk slowly, as if I were frail. The performance had already begun. The living room was packed. I recognized Dr. Kumar near the fireplace, trying to look casual while nursing a whiskey. Jessica the notary sat on the couch with an oversized purse that undoubtedly held her seal and stamps. There were others, too, a couple I didn't recognize, who watched me with calculating eyes, an older woman with a notebook, who might have been another medical professional, and several of Sarah's lawyer friends from her firm. Everyone you remember my father, Sarah announced, still gripping my arm. Dad, you know Dr. Kumar, and this is Jessica and the Hendersons from next door, and... She introduced each person slowly, watching to see if I'd struggle with names or show confusion. I greeted each, warmly noting positions, exits, and the barely concealed documents on the coffee table. Thomas appeared from the kitchen, his smile tight with nerves. Milton, happy Thanksgiving. Can I get you a drink? Just water, thank you. I said, though I noticed he'd already poured what looked like a generous whiskey, probably planning to claim I was drinking heavily. Emma and Jack ran in from the playroom, and my heart clenched. These innocent children had no idea their parents were about to destroy their grandfather for money. I hugged them both, memorizing the feeling. After today, who knew when I'd see them again? "Grandpa want to see my new game," Jack asked excitedly. "After dinner, sweetheart," Sarah intervened quickly. "Grandpa needs to rest. Why don't you two go play until we call you?" The children ran off, and Sarah guided me to a chair positioned where everyone could observe me. The stage was set, the actors in place. All that remained was for Sarah to spring her trap, not knowing I'd already escaped it, and built my own. "So, Dad," Sarah began perching on the arm of my chair with false affection. "How have you been feeling? Any more episodes?" The room leaned in slightly, vultures sensing carry-on. "Episodes?" I asked mildly. "You know the confusion we talked about. Like when you couldn't remember where you parked at the grocery store last week." I'd never told her about any parking issue because it had never happened. "Oh, that. Turned out I'd simply gone out the wrong exit. The store renovated recently." "Of course," she said smoothly. "But Thomas and I have been worried. Haven't we, honey?" Thomas nodded eagerly. "Very worried. In fact, we've consulted with some specialists about how to protect your assets if something happens." Here it came. The setup for the papers, the power of attorney, the conservatorship. Around the room, people shifted into better positions to witness my supposed agreement to sign away my life. "That's thoughtful of you," I said, playing the grateful father one last time. Family looking out for family. Speaking of which, where are Frank and Dorothy? I thought they were coming. Sarah's smile flickered. "Oh, they had other plans. You must have misunderstood." "Strange. I spoke to them yesterday." I pulled out my phone, noting how several people leaned forward to watch. "Let me just call and check." "No need," Sarah said quickly, placing her hand over my phone. "I'm sure they'll stop by later. Now about those documents." The trap was closing, but not around me. I smiled at my daughter, memorizing her face in this moment before everything changed. She thought she was moments away from victory. Instead, she was seconds from disaster. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, standing up, despite her attempt to keep me seated. "But first, I brought something for you. It's in the guest room in the drawer, where I always leave your mother's recipes when I visit. Why don't you go get it while Thomas fetches those papers?" Sarah hesitated, caught between maintaining her concerned daughter act and her eagerness to get to the signing. "Can't it wait until after?" "Please, Sarah, it's important. A Thanksgiving tradition your mother would have wanted maintained." The mention of Martha decided her. Sarah couldn't refuse without seeming heartless in front of her assembled witnesses. "Of course, Dad. I'll be right back." As she headed upstairs, I turned to the room full of conspirators and smiled. Such a devoted daughter. I'm truly blessed. Thomas fumbled with papers while Dr. Kumar studiously examined his whiskey. Jessica clutched her notary bag like a life preserver. They all sensed something was off, but couldn't identify what. From upstairs came the sound of a drawer opening, then silence, then a scream that shattered the carefully orchestrated calm of Sarah's Thanksgiving trap. The reversal had begun. Sarah's scream echoed through the house like a siren announcing disaster. Every head in the living room snapped toward the staircase. Thomas dropped the papers he'd been arranging, his face draining of color. Dr. Kumar set down his whiskey with a trembling hand. Jessica the notary half stood, then sat back down, uncertain. "Sarah!" Thomas called out, his voice cracking. "Honey, what's wrong?" Footsteps pounded overhead, frantic and stumbling. Then Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching papers in one hand and my letter in the other. Her perfect makeup was already streaking with tears of rage and shock. "You knew," she whispered, staring at me with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You knew everything." I stood calmly brushing imaginary lint from my suit jacket. "Hello, Sarah. I see you found your Thanksgiving surprise." "What's going on?" Thomas demanded, moving toward the stairs. "Sarah, what is that?" She descended slowly, her legs shaking. The confident predator who'd answered the door 20 minutes ago had vanished, replaced by a woman watching her carefully constructed plan crumble. "He has recordings," she said numbly. "Recordings of our calls with Gerald, with Nancy, everything. He has Dr. Harrison's cognitive evaluation showing perfect mental function. He has—" Her voice broke. "He has FBI contact information about your forgeries, Thomas." The room erupted. Thomas lunged for the papers in Sarah's hands while Dr. Kumar headed for the door. Jessica was already stuffing her notary materials back into her bag, face pale with the realization she'd nearly participated in elder fraud. "Nobody leaves," I said quietly, but my voice carried the authority of a man who'd commanded soldiers in combat. "Not until we finish this properly." "You set us up," Thomas snarled, papers crumpling in his grip. "You entrapped us." "Entrapment requires inducing someone to commit a crime they wouldn't otherwise commit," I replied. "I simply documented the crimes you were already planning. There's a difference." Sarah sank onto the couch, still clutching my letter. "How long have you known—" "Since I came to deliver your grandmother's turkey platter last week. You really should close your kitchen window when discussing how to steal your father's assets." "It wasn't stealing," she protested weakly. "We were trying to protect you." "Stop!" The word came out sharper than I intended. "Just stop. You've been documenting false evidence of my confusion for months. You hired a disgraced nurse to create fraudulent medical records. You assembled this crowd to witness my humiliation while you tricked me into signing away my life's work. At least have the courage to own your actions." Dr. Kumar made another move towards the door. "This doesn't concern me. I was just here for dinner." "Sit down, doctor," I commanded. "Your text messages with Sarah about providing a false diagnosis are included in that package. The medical board will be very interested in your willingness to declare someone incompetent for money." He collapsed back into his chair, defeat written across his face. "You can't prove anything?" Thomas blustered. "Those recordings were made illegally. The documents could be forged." Thomas stopped talking, Sarah said quietly. "He's right. We did this. We planned all of it. Only because we're drowning." Thomas exploded, turning on his wife. "You said this would be easy, that he was getting senile anyway, that we were just accelerating the inevitable." "I was trying to save our family," Sarah shot back. "You're the one who lost everything gambling on cryptocurrency and stealing from clients." "Enough," I said. "Your guests don't need to witness a marital dispute on top of everything else." I looked around the room at the assembled witnesses to my planned destruction. The Hendersons were edging towards the door. The woman with the notebook had closed it, her services clearly no longer needed. Sarah's lawyer friends looked like they wanted to vanish into the furniture. "Those of you who were unwitting participants in this scheme are free to leave," I announced. "But understand that your presence here has been documented. If any of you attempt to support Sarah's claims about my mental state in the future, you'll be admitting to participating in conspiracy to commit fraud." The exodus was swift. Within minutes, only family remained: Sarah, Thomas, Dr. Kumar, too terrified to move, and my grandchildren, who thankfully remained in the playroom, oblivious to their parents' destruction. "What happens now?" Sarah asked, voice small and defeated. "Are you going to have us arrested?" "Thomas will be arrested Monday morning regardless of what I do," I said. "The FBI has been building a case about his embezzlement for months. As for you, that depends on what you do next." "I could fight this," she said, some of her lawyer instincts returning. "Contest the trust claim. You really are showing signs of decline." "You could try," I agreed. "But you'd be fighting Dr. Marcus Harrison's evaluation recorded evidence of your conspiracy testimony from Nancy Garrett, who's already cooperating with authorities to save her license, and a paper trail showing you and Thomas are $400,000 in debt, with no legitimate way to pay it." Sarah flinched at each point, recognizing the thoroughness of her defeat. My phone buzzed, Marcus texting a single question mark, our agreed signal for a status check. "I have a question for you, Sarah," I said, typing a quick response to stand by. "What did you think would happen after you took control of my assets? Did you picture me docile and grateful in some cut-rate nursing home while you spent my money? Did you think I'd just fade away conveniently? I didn't think— She started, then stopped. I wasn't thinking about that. I was only thinking about saving my family from bankruptcy. By destroying your father, I said. Tell me, when did I become expendable? When did the man who paid for your education, your wedding, your house, become nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to your financial salvation? Tears streamed down her face now, but I couldn't tell if they were from remorse or self-pity. The saddest part, I continued, is that if you'd simply asked for help, told me the truth about your situation, I would have helped you find a solution. But you chose betrayal instead. You chose to treat me like an enemy to be conquered, rather than a father who loved you. What do you want me to say? Sarah sobbed. That I'm sorry, that I'm a terrible daughter. Fine, I'm sorry, I'm terrible. Is that what you want to hear? What I wanted, I said quietly, was a daughter who valued me as more than a bank account. But we don't always get what we want. I moved towards the door, then paused. Your children are innocent in this. I've set up educational trusts for them managed by Dorothy. Whatever happens to you and Thomas, they'll have what they need for college. You're really leaving. Sarah stood swaying slightly. On Thanksgiving, what will I tell Emma and Jack? Tell them their grandfather loves them. Tell them he had another commitment. Or tell them the truth that you tried to destroy me for money, and I declined to stay for dinner with my would-be captors. Your choice. Dad, please, she begged, moving toward me. We can work this out. I'll get help, therapy, whatever you want. I stopped at the door and turned back one last time. What I want is my daughter back. The one who used to fall asleep on my lap during movie night. The one who cried on my shoulder when her prom date stood her up. The one who danced with me at her wedding and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Daddy." But that daughter is gone, isn't she? Maybe she never really existed. She existed, Sarah whispered. She just got lost. Then I hope someday she finds her way back. But I won't be waiting at the door anymore. I walked out of the house where my daughter had planned my destruction down the driveway, where conspirators' cars were rapidly departing, and into Marcus's waiting vehicle. The Brown Palace, sir. He asked professional enough not to comment on the obvious distress of the situation. The Brown Palace, I confirmed. My real family is waiting. As we pulled away, I saw Sarah standing in her doorway, still clutching the evidence of her betrayal. Thomas appeared behind her, gesticulating wildly, probably already blaming her for the failure of their plan. My phone rang. Frank. We're all here, he said warmly. Tables set, wines poured, and Dorothy's threatening to send a search party if you don't show up soon. I'm on my way, I said, feeling the weight on my chest begin to lift. 10 minutes. Everything. Handled. As well as it could be. Good. We've got your chair waiting. Robert's already made a toast to Martha. We're saving the rest for when you arrive. As Denver passed outside the windows, I thought about families of choice versus families of birth. Sarah had been given every advantage birth could provide and had chosen to squander it on greed. The people waiting for me at the hotel had chosen to stand by me when it mattered. Sir, Marcus said quietly, I don't mean to intrude, but my grandmother used to say that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when life gets hard. Your grandmother was a wise woman. Yes, sir, she was. And if you don't mind me saying, anyone who'd try to hurt their own father for money doesn't deserve him anyway. We rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. When we pulled up to the Brown Palace, I saw familiar faces through the dining room windows. Frank laughing at something Robert had said, Dorothy arranging plates, David helping with wine service, Jennifer chatting with Mrs. Chen. Sir, Marcus said as I prepared to exit, Happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for your service, both military and today. I shook his hand firmly. Thank you, son. You reminded me that good people still exist. Would you like to join us? I'm sure we can squeeze in another chair." His face lit up. "I wouldn't want to intrude on family." "That's exactly what you wouldn't be doing," I said. "Park the car and come in. Dorothy makes cornbread stuffing that'll make you forget every trouble in the world." As we walked into the hotel together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days' peace. Behind me lay betrayal and broken trust. Ahead waited people who valued me for more than my bank account. The war was over. I'd won by every measure that mattered. But victories in family conflicts never taste sweet. They taste like necessity, like survival, like the bitter medicine of truth finally swallowed. But surrounded by chosen family on Thanksgiving Day, I could almost believe that healing was possible. Not with Sarah, perhaps, but within myself. The father she'd tried to destroy was still standing still, strong, still capable of love, even if he'd learned to be more careful about where he placed it. That was something to be thankful for. The Brown Palace dining room glowed with warm light and warmer company. 23 people had gathered around the extended table, each one there, by choice, rather than obligation. The contrast with Sarah's house of conspirators couldn't have been sharper. "There he is," Frank boomed as I entered with Marcus. "The man of the hour. Come on, we've been waiting to start the real celebration." Dorothy hurried over, studying my face with sisterly concern. "How did it go?" "As expected," I said, accepting her embrace. "Sarah found what I left for her. The reaction was dramatic." "Good," Dorothy said firmly. "That girl needs dramatic. Maybe it'll wake her up to what she's thrown away." Robert raised his wine glass as I took my seat at the head of the table. "Before we begin, I'd like to propose a toast. To Milton Hayes, friend, brother, uncle, and proof that integrity isn't just a word in the dictionary. You faced betrayal with dignity and protected what truly matters. Martha would be proud. To Milton." The room chorused, and I had to blink away sudden moisture in my eyes. "And to all of you," I responded, standing with my own glass. "For reminding me that family is defined by loyalty and love, not just DNA. You've given me the greatest gift possible today, the knowledge that I'm not alone." As we settled into dinner, the conversation flowed naturally. David updated everyone on his latest cases, carefully avoiding any mention of the legal storm about to hit Thomas. Jennifer regaled the table with stories from her FBI days that had everyone laughing. Mrs. Chen shared memories of Martha's kindness when she'd first moved from Beijing alone and overwhelmed by Denver life. She showed up at my door with a casserole and a map of the city, Mrs. Chen recalled. Every good restaurant, every reliable doctor, every peaceful park was marked. She said, "Everyone needs a friend who knows the good spots." I never forgot that kindness. Marcus, initially shy among strangers, soon opened up when he discovered 3 other veterans at the table. Within minutes, they were swapping stories and comparing notes on VA services, welcomed completely into the fold. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. Sarah had sent a photo my letter laid out on her kitchen table beside the other documents. No message, just the image. Evidence that she'd absorbed the full scope of what I'd left for her. "Everything all right?" Robert asked quietly, noticing my attention on the phone. "Sarah's processing reality," I said, showing him the image. "Whether she learns from it remains to be seen." "What exactly did you leave in that drawer?" Dorothy asked, having overheard. I set down my fork, deciding everyone here had earned the truth. Everything she needed to understand that her plan had failed before it began. Dr. Harrison's cognitive evaluation, recordings of her conspiracy calls, evidence of their debts and Thomas's crimes, FBI contact information, and a letter explaining that I knew everything but still loved her despite her betrayal. "That's more grace than I would have shown," Frank muttered. "Planning to lock you away in a nursing home while stealing your money, that's evil, Milton. Pure evil." "Evil requires intention to cause harm for its own sake," I corrected gently. "Sarah was desperate, not evil. Desperate people do terrible things, but that doesn't make them irredeemable. Just currently lost. You're a better man than most, Helen Sullivan observed. I'm not sure I could forgive someone who tried to destroy me like that. I didn't say I'd forgiven her, I clarified. Forgiveness requires repentance, and Sarah hasn't reached that point yet. What I've done is leave the door open a crack for the daughter I once knew to find her way back. Whether she walks through it is up to her. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as dessert arrived Martha's recipe for pecan pie that Dorothy had mastered. But my phone buzzed again. This time a text from an unknown number. Mr. Hayes, this is Jessica. I wanted to apologize. I had no idea what I was really being asked to do. Sarah told me you were showing signs of dementia and needed help managing your affairs. I should have questioned it. I'm deeply sorry. I showed it to Robert, who nodded approvingly. At least one person learned something today. That's progress. As the evening wound down, I stood to address the gathered family one more time. Before we part, I have some announcements. First, the house Martha and I shared will be donated to the Colorado Veterans Foundation next week. They'll convert it into transitional housing for veterans returning to civilian life. Martha would have loved that purpose for our home. Murmurs of approval rippled around the table. Second, I've established education trusts for my grandchildren. Dorothy has graciously agreed to serve as trustee, ensuring Emma and Jack have what they need, regardless of their parents' situation. They're good kids, Dorothy said. They deserve a chance whatever happens with Sarah and Thomas. Finally, I continued. I want each of you to know that you've saved me today. Not from Sarah's scheme I had that handled, but from despair. You've reminded me that the family we choose can be stronger than the family we're born into. Thank you for choosing me. The gathering broke up slowly, people reluctant to end such a warm evening. Marcus exchanged numbers with the other veterans planning to meet for coffee. Mrs. Chen extracted promises to join her for weekly dim sum. Jennifer pulled me aside privately. The FBI will be moving on Thomas Monday morning, she said quietly. Early before the markets open, Sarah might get swept up in it if she's at the house. You should know that. I appreciate the warning, I said, though I suspect Sarah's smart enough to distance herself now that she knows we know. Maybe. Desperate people don't always make smart choices. As the last guests departed, I found myself alone with Robert and Frank in the hotel lobby. The brothers who'd become my brothers still standing guard after all these years. You need anything you call, Frank said firmly. Day or night. Sarah might try something else when the shock wears off. Or Thomas might when he realizes the walls are closing in, Robert added. Your security system is good, but maybe stay somewhere else for a few days, just to be safe. I'll be fine, I assured them. Sarah's too smart to try anything now, and Thomas is about to have bigger problems than me. But as I returned to my hotel room, I found myself thinking about Emma and Jack. Innocent casualties in their parents' war against me. Would they understand someday why their grandfather had vanished from their lives? Would Sarah poison them against me? Or would she find enough honesty to admit her own role in our estrangement? My phone rang just as I was preparing for bed. Sarah's number. I debated not answering, then decided to hear what she had to say. Dad. Her voice was hoarse, probably from crying. I know you probably don't want to talk to me. I answered, didn't I? The kids are asking where you went. I don't know what to tell them. Tell them the truth in age-appropriate terms. Their grandfather had other commitments, but loves them very much. That's it. That's all you want them to know. What would you prefer I tell them, Sarah, that their mother tried to steal my money and lock me away? That their father is about to be arrested for embezzlement? They're children. They deserve better than the truth right now. Silence stretched between us before she spoke again. Thomas is packing. He says he's going to try to get to Mexico before Monday. I told him he's an idiot, but he's not listening. Then you're smarter than he is. Running makes everything worse. What should I do? The question came out small, frightened like the little girl who used to ask me to check for monsters under her bed. Get a lawyer. A real one, not one of your friends who helped plan this disaster. Separate your finances from Thomas immediately. Cooperate with authorities. Protect your children. Start rebuilding your life on something more solid than schemes and lies. Will you ever forgive me? I thought carefully before answering. Forgiveness isn't a simple yes or no, Sarah. It's a process that requires genuine repentance, amended behavior, and time. You haven't even begun that journey yet. Ask me again in a year after you've shown you've learned from this. I love you, Dad, she whispered. I know you don't believe that right now, but I do. I got so scared of losing everything that I lost sight of what really mattered. Fear makes people do terrible things, I acknowledged. But it doesn't excuse them. You made choices, Sarah. Now you have to live with the consequences. I know, I wish I could take it all back. But you can't. None of us can unmake our choices. We can only choose better going forward. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my hotel room, city lights twinkling beyond the window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Monday would bring Thomas's arrest, and whatever fallout followed. But tonight, surrounded by the lingering warmth of chosen family, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days' hope. Not for reconciliation with Sarah that would take more than one tearful phone call. Not for Thomas who'd chosen his path and would walk it to whatever end awaited. But hope for Emma and Jack, that they might grow up to be better than their parents. Hope for myself, that I could build a life rich in real relationships rather than transactional ones. Hope that Martha's values of kindness, integrity, and service would live on through the veterans who'd find shelter in our former home. Earlier today, Sarah had screamed when she opened that drawer and found her plans in ruins. But what she'd really discovered was a mirror showing her exactly who she'd become. Whether she'd look away or finally see herself, clearly remained to be determined. I pulled out the photo I'd carried all day, 5-year-old Sarah on my shoulders at the construction site, both of us grinning at the camera. That little girl had been real once. Maybe if Sarah stared long enough at her own reflection in the ruins of her schemes, she might find her way back to who she'd been before greed consumed her. Or maybe not. Some people never learn, never grow, never recognize the walls they build are prisons of their own making. But that was Sarah's journey to take or abandon. Mine led forward into a future where family meant choice, where love came without price tags, where Thanksgiving was about gratitude for what truly mattered, rather than schemes to steal what didn't. The drawer had been opened. The truth had been revealed. The rest was up to Sarah. As for Milton Hayes, he was going to be just fine. Is there anything that feels more just than watching someone's carefully laid plans crumble at their own hands? Have you ever had to protect yourself from a family member who saw you as nothing more than a bank account? What would you have done in my situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like, and consider subscribing for more stories about family betrayal and the triumph of truth over treachery. And if you know someone who needs to hear that they're not alone in dealing with family members who value money over relationships, please share this story with them. Thank you for joining me on this difficult journey. May your holidays be filled with genuine love from people who value you for who you are not what you have. And remember, the family that chooses you is often more precious than the family you're born into. Choose wisely, love freely, but always protect yourself from those who would use that love against you. Until next time, this is Milton Hayes, wishing you peace, prosperity, and the wisdom to know which bridges to build and which to burn.